Your mom's always so stylish. I know. What's your experiment?
That's really true, though.
It's so true.
I feel like I always use this example, but there was one day I was like, I'm going to step up my game and dress as nice as John. I came in, he was wearing a sweatshirt and like a basketball jersey, and he still looked professional. And I was like, how does this? It's got to be something with the hair. Can you pass me? I know, really, though.
It's just like all blends in. So.
Brian's always asking him what his secret is.
Well, did the printer work today?
No, but it's black and white, so it's not. I think I officially broke the color printer yesterday trying to print these off. So this is what you guys need. These are this is the completion of what you didn't get yesterday plus today's stuff.
It's totally okay.
It's like when your phone falls behind the bed.
I know, but it's a lot bigger than a phone, and I really can't put my hand back there.
Oh, yeah.
It's fine. I like it. It's good.
Guillermo, there's the completion of yesterday's what didn't print plus today's, so should be good to go. Also, if anyone's, apparently I just kept this for myself. It's fine. Okay, well, I think that's everyone. Logan is not going to be here today. He's joining us in spirit on the video call later. So that is okay. I'm just going to throw this up there really quick for you guys so everyone can see what I'm talking about. How did the homework go last night? Everyone get through it? Did it take you more than an hour? No? Okay, I just wanted to see if it was about as much time as I estimated or not. So good to know. Glad it was in there. This isn't going to pull it up. But it's okay. I know what the first question is. So today, you guys probably learned this a little. Actually, really quick before we talk about today, I would like to cover anything interesting that you guys learned from the vision casting homework. Anything that stood out to you?
Something that I liked was step 3. It said repeat it regularly. I think that's, I can't speak, but that is important. I feel like I didn't even know the mission statement in my first semester, just because nobody really told me what it was, or it wasn't continually brought up. And so that's something that I want to implement in my team, is to actually tell them the mission statement and make sure they understand it, and then repeat it regularly. So,
yeah. That principle really stood out to me too. And I don't know if you guys will ever have time to go back and watch the videos, but we definitely don't want to repeat it regularly in an annoying way. You know what I mean? Like every day we're just cheering on the mission statement or whatever. But I think there's tactful ways and good ways that we can incorporate it into those teaching moments or those training moments, or when we're setting goals, reminding people what the ultimate vision and direction is that we should be going. We've definitely found that repeating it regularly is important, and I'm not surprised that you didn't know what it was your first semester. That's the case with a lot of people, but that's your job as supervisors to be the one to reinforce that learning, because we start that in training, right? But you guys are then the ones that are with them every single day after that, and so you're the ones that have the opportunity to bring that into your own team and their training moments. So appreciate that, Grace. Anything else that stood out to you guys?
Well, it was just going along with what Grace said. I think that repetition is not only key to know the role, but really to internalize the purpose of the statement. Because like we might memorize it. And I think that my lead on my first semester was really, really good at, repeating it over and over again. And like I knew it. I knew it, and like my second semester too, but did I really feel it? So I think that that's when we come as leads to, bring that from the brain to the heart, so that people really feel the statement and really are willing, committed to help. And like, obviously, we can't control the degree of their commitment, but we can influence that. And so I think that, repetition as well as establishing culture where that is central and vital for the progression, not only of our team, but the BSC is going to be key. Which is why I think that this is a fantastic role where the rubber meets the road, we're there with the agents to see how they're internalizing that purpose.
Yes, no, I totally agree. Sorry, give me just a second, you guys. This is giving me more problems than I like. I really like what you said about how you can't control the way your agents feel about it, but you can take those opportunities to teach them, right? You can't make them feel like they have this mission. You can't force them to feel attached to it at all. Good grief.
Kind of going along with the gospel, like in Second Nephi, it says that the Heavenly Father brings the Spirit up to the hearts of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's really up to people to bring it into their hearts. So we can just bring this onto them, and it's really up to them to bring it, internalize that purpose.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sorry, my browser shut down that had my presentation open. So we'll just start. Today we're going to talk about trust. So I appreciate the follow-up on vision. And hopefully it felt like, I know there was a lot of information yesterday, but hopefully it felt like it all tied in, hopefully towards the end as you guys are reading that information on vision and where your guys' role now plays into that and how it plays into what you need to do to help your team see the direction and the bigger picture of the BSC. Today, you guys did a little bit of reading last night from Stephen Covey's. Actually, this was what was talked about on Saturday. It was a recommendation from Jared to add it, but the speed of trust. And you guys got a little bit of a summary of that. So we're going to just start with a discussion today. What stood out to you about the readings, or what was something that was new to you, I guess, about trust in particular?
I think to me it was realizing at least that trust is something very fragile. Akemi and I, we were talking about it though about 3 days ago-ish. And she gave me the analogy of the bucket, with stones inside or the rocks inside. And she said, trust takes time to build it. You need to like put one rock at a time in the bucket, but it doesn't take much before, the bucket is empty. You can just like, I don't know how you say it, like push it or shove it on the side and all the rocks are gonna fall out. So it doesn't take much before, your agents lose your trust or your credibility, and then you lose your credibility as well. So I like that, thinking how fragile it is and how we need to work towards building it.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. We're actually going to talk about the trust bucket analogy today. So that's great that Akemi brought that up too. But it's true. It takes time. Trust is something that you build upon. It's not something that people automatically have in you when they first meet you, right? It definitely takes time to build that up. And I appreciate that that's something you took away from that. Any other thoughts from your readings last night, Kim?
I really liked the part it talks about your agents, or like people know you trust them when I'm gonna say it wrong. The best way to build trust is when you care about the people you're leading and they know you care about them. Because I think oftentimes like we can care about people, but do they actually know that we care about them? Because I think the best way to build trust is when they know that we care about them, because then they're able to open up and they're able to feel like we've created that safe environment so they can trust us.
Yeah, I agree. Relationships definitely play a huge role in trust. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, but you could care about somebody and they could still not feel that, right? Or you could be trying to show you care but not be genuine about it. So maybe off that question and that thought, what are some ways that you guys have felt cared about by your supervisors in the past, or what's something that they've done that's helped you build that trust or relationship with them? Kim?
My lead would always make sure that she was not per se like following up on things in my life, but she took the time to get to know me and the things that are going on in my life outside of work. And then maybe later down the week, she's like, oh, hey, how did this go? Or what happened with this? And it just showed that she cared enough to know, and she remembered the things that were going on in my life, and she cared to know how they went.
Yeah, so it wasn't just, okay, I'm concerned about this in our one-on-one. It was the follow-up and the things in between that helped you feel that way. Love that. Jeremy?
And I'm sorry, I'm bringing up again Kimmy. I think I just love Kimmy. She's amazing. She's a fantastic lead. But something she did with me is really following what DNC 121 talks about, recruiting at good times and with sharpness, so with exactness, saying, okay, this is exactly what you're struggling with, and that's what we need to work on. But doing it lovingly as well, and expressing love at the end, so that I don't feel that we're enemies at all. And so being able to balance that out and having the trust that I'm not going to get offended, and trusting as well in the fact that, she cares about my potential and what I can do. And she sees so much in me that she's willing to tell me, point out those, the little elements that I need to fix or that I need to improve. So I think that to me, that meant a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that you pointed that out, because I think there's definitely an aspect of caring about correction, right? If you don't care enough to correct somebody, then you're not going to do it. You're just going to let them continue doing what they're doing. So there's definitely an aspect of caring about a person that comes with that. And it sounds like Akemi's really mastered that ability to be able to show that. So I'm glad that you felt that. Before we move on, anything else that stood out to anybody from the building a winning culture last night?
So I think my favorite part was acknowledge of the tree, like the 4 cores of capability. I felt that it was something that I could relate not only to my leads, but like professors or church leaders. Because first you talk about like character and then competence. And so I was just relating how people like that knows, like good leaders will first like build you up as a person, as a character. And so it says that they will help you with like your integrity, with your intent. And so I just felt like how one-on-ones have affected me and helped me through my process here at the BSC. And then like after they help you get better as a person, then you can see their results. And so like it all makes sense. It was pretty good. Yeah, that's what I like most.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to actually fill this out really quick before we move on. But I definitely think a good leader is someone who can build you up, right, in that way, and can give you corrective feedback without tearing you down, but helping to motivate and move you forward. And we have the special opportunity of being a part of that experience when people are in a growing and learning phase of their life, and they're gaining tools here at school to be able to help them in the future. But we also get the opportunity in our work with them to provide them with experiences and knowledge and skills that they also are going to take with them, not just from their education, but from their job experience. And so I think it's important to remember that as unique aspect of our job, that we get to be a part of that development and growth while they're here and learning for their future careers. Okay, let's go ahead and fill out this tree, if you guys will, just to kind of test and see where you guys are remembering at. Like I said, hopefully you have better remembrance of this since you're getting this kind of twice. I'm definitely not going to go as in depth with this as Jerry talked to you on Saturday, so benefits. But does anyone remember what the first 2 main aspects of gaining credibility and trust were on the diagram?
Integrity and
I did not bring anything up here. Does that sound right, Jared?
Well, the two
Either
aspects,
start with C.
Isn't it character?
With
Character,
Character.
yeah, so it
Character is
was,
one of
the
them.
first one was with character and then the second one is,
and then within character,
yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. But within character, yes. Integrity and intent. I really should have my thing up and make sure I got these in the right order. Something I really enjoyed when I was first learning about this was, Jared just pointed out to me that this is the root of the tree, right? And I really appreciated that. Why do you guys think that these two things make up the base or the foundation of trust or credibility?
Well, if you have bad intent, like if you're there to harm people, they're not gonna trust you. So I think that's part of why it's the base.
That's true. People can definitely tell your intentions behind things pretty easily. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, for character, when it comes to integrity, they know where you're standing. So they know exactly how you're gonna react, and so they can trust you with important things. They can open up and be vulnerable with you. They know that you're not gonna disclose that confidential information to anyone else. And so therefore, they can, whenever they feel overwhelmed, when you need to detox, come up to you and talk to you about what's going on in their lives, so they can, work later on, focus again on their jobs.
Yeah, I really like that. And I definitely think integrity is a reputation that follows you, right? Similarly to how trust is something you have to build. I think that's the same with integrity. If you've had a bad experience with somebody in the past where they know they can't trust you with private information, that does something to your integrity, right? And that follows you, and you either have to recover from that in some way, or your employees just continue to believe that about you. So definitely think that's important to remember. I thought something that was interesting from our training that we had on Saturday was the question that Mikhail kind of posed, was can you not love somebody but still trust them? And I think that boils down to this character aspect. This is the foundation, and you can't have the rest of the tree without believing in somebody's character. And I think that's where the love comes from, was kind of my thinking as I pondered his question, because you can still trust somebody, you can still love somebody but not trust them, right? You still have the base of a tree, not really the completeness of it, right? But you have to start with character, or you're not going to be able to see the fruits of it. So, any other thoughts before we move on to competence? Okay, this one was probably one of my favorites to learn and write about. But let's go ahead and fill in these other sides. Anyone remember what 3 and 4 are?
Capabilities and resources.
Very good. Sebastian has a good memory. I was taking notes last night, which I appreciate. This was not initially an aspect of trust that I had considered, but made so much sense after I had learned about it. Any thoughts about why these would be important to trust or credibility, or this aspect of it? If not, that's okay. The reason why I was so surprised by this aspect of trust is I hadn't considered that you could still have good character, be a really good person that people enjoy being around. But if you don't have the competence, the capabilities, and the ability to provide results, people aren't really going to trust you, right? So I could tell my employee, yes, thank you for that feedback. I'm going to go and find a solution to this for you. But then if I don't do anything with that feedback, if I don't take it to the proper people, if I don't bring those results back to my employee, maybe even if I did get something done about it, then I lose, like Jared was explaining earlier on Saturday, I lose credibility. Because not only did I not provide the results in that situation, so they don't necessarily trust my ability to provide results to them. But then they have to question my capability in that area, right? Because they didn't really see anything come of what I was promising them. And so was I really capable of doing something for them? Like I said, this was an aspect of trust I hadn't considered before, because I really felt like a lot of my trust is based on a person's character, but truly competence and ability to follow through with promises also plays a huge part of trust, and especially in your role as supervisors, that's going to be something you have to take into consideration.
I have like an example of this. So my dad, he owns a business, and him and his business partner, they're like complete opposites. My dad is like the nicest, most mellow guy. Like anyone who knows my dad, he's like all crying. He's just the best. He's like really, really chill, very like loving and very relaxed. And then his business partner is Charlie, and Charlie's like so intense. He like is kind of scary, very intimidating. So they balance each other out really well. But my dad's business partner, he's like starting to retire now. So he's not in the office as much, and people like employees have been kind of slacking off, and they haven't been as productive because they don't feel like as responsible, because my dad is like more understanding. And so that's one thing that my dad, he's like really had to work on lately, is like focusing on results and people's like capabilities instead of just like being like the nice guy and like the good cop. He's learning how to balance like, okay, how can I implement all of these 4 things instead of just focusing on 2 of them? Because if you have one without the other, then it's just not going to be as effective as it would be with both of them.
Yeah, I love and appreciate that example. And I think that's actually on the next slide that we're talking about, is the fact that trust isn't just from you to your employees, but it's also from your employees to you, right? So not only do your employees have to have the character, but they also have to show you competence in their job as well. And that's an aspect of your trust in them as an employee. Okay.
Well, we may have already answered these questions, but just to make sure I haven't missed any thoughts. Why is trust important in a supervisor position? Why do you guys feel like that's something we're learning about?
I think that if people don't trust you, they won't like have a desire to work as hard. Like if they don't trust that you're doing your job and you're doing all that you can to be productive and like get things done, then they're not going to want to do it as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think when you feel trusted by somebody, you don't want to betray that trust. You don't want to disappoint them in that. And so it pulls things out of people that they wouldn't have without that trust, right? It yields results that you otherwise wouldn't see. And I believe it pulls the best out of people, really, when you can show them that trust and when they have that in you. Any other?
Jessica, am I allowed to talk in this meeting?
Of course, please share, Carl.
I look at trees. When I train my leads, I do it a little differently. I do it with a piggy bank. And so as leads, you have this bank or a person, right? And you need to be depositing trust coins in this bank. You build these trust coins and you deposit in the bank, because someday you're going to have to go for a withdrawal of trust in you. And if you haven't invested trust in them, you can't withdraw trust. Same with your bank, right? You want to go buy this, purchase this thing. If you haven't invested in saving money, you can't use that money to purchase anything. So as a lead, if you've invested in them, so they have this trust account with you, then when you need them to stay and work a Saturday or work 5 extra hours during the first week of school, it's easier to make that ask because you've invested in that trust, and they trust you and know you wouldn't be asking them for this withdrawal of trust, it's just effort, unless you yourself were doing it or you yourself thought, are doing the same thing. And so in the past, that's kind of how I've approached our leads is, hey, you got to invest some to get something. Not that this is a tit for tat, but that's how that works. It's just human nature, right? You're not going to give your extra time for someone you don't trust. So I envision this as a piggy bank, that you're making the deposits and you're taking withdrawals every once in a while. And they're doing the same with you, right? Your employees are investing in you so they can ask for time off, or they can ask for this favor when this thing happens or something like that. So that's how trust works, kind of going back and forth.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And that was not something I had considered, but I definitely like that perspective of the investment, because like Carl said, if we're asking something of them, but they have no trust in us for us to withdraw on, then that ask is going to be very different, and it's going to be received differently by an employee. I really like that analogy. Thanks, Carl. So like I said, there's two main relationships that I want you guys to consider in your new roles as supervisors, and what you need to make sure that you're building this trust. And this is trust from employee to supervisor. Like I said, most of your employees aren't going to automatically have this trust in you. You're going to have to build that reputation with them. It's going to take time. It's going to take investing in them and experiences to build that trust with them. And then number two is trust from supervisor to employee. And what I'd like to challenge you is, yes, your employee can betray that trust a little bit and give you reason to doubt, but I think that it can be helpful as a supervisor to walk into those teams and those situations already with the assumption that you're going to trust your employees to do their best, and then letting them prove to you whether that was a good or bad decision. But we as supervisors have the ability to just say, I can put that trust in you as an employee, and you can tell me whether or not that was a good idea, but I'm going to start out with that on that foot. So this has already been shared, so we'll just cover it quickly. And it's similar, but not teaching the same lesson as Carl's analogy. This is actually an analogy from Brian that he had shared with me in the past. And that's the fact that trust, similar, is like a bucket, right? And we're adding drops of water or cups of water to that bucket anytime that we have a one-on-one experience or follow up on a test we know they were having that week, or take those opportunities to build our relationship with them. We're adding water to that bucket. But like Guillermo was saying, and something to keep in mind, is it doesn't take much to lose credibility with somebody or to lose trust with somebody. It doesn't take much to knock over the bucket and either spill all of the water that you've collected or spill most of it and then have to start from a smaller amount. So consider that and keep it in mind moving forward about your actions, and just making sure that you're taking those opportunities to add to the bucket and avoiding the opportunities to tip it over. And if it does tip over and you lose trust, that happens. It's happened to many of us in our experience. Don't be afraid to set the bucket back up and start filling it up, right? Because there's still ways to gain that trust back with people.
I just got another question on staff on this, but I think as a young leader in my life, I would have thought coming to them and saying they were doing something wrong would be tipping the bucket over. But I think if we're learning about leadership here, you actually gain trust if you're consistent. Like if you are going and telling them to go in a constructive way, you're not tipping the bucket over, or you're not drilling a hole in the bucket. You're actually being consistent. When the bucket gets tipped over is when you say they're doing a good job or they're doing it right when they're not, and then all of a sudden you're forced to have to go tell them they're doing something wrong or doing something, something like that. Not that we should be always harping on them, but I think when I was younger, I would have thought, oh, I'm going to tip the bucket over and they won't trust me if I say anything bad to them at all. So I think it's good to know that bad isn't necessarily losing trust. It's inconsistency that seems to lose trust more than anything else, in my life anyway.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit on Thursday, but I think something surrounded by feedback or constructive criticism is the fact that it always has to be a negative experience, or it's always going to be a negative experience. And I appreciate that Carl pointed out that's not always the case. And oftentimes us being able to make those good experiences out of giving that feedback is what builds trust and credibility with us, with our agents, because like Guillermo said earlier, it's showing them that we care enough to correct them. I had just thinking about Carl's comment, and maybe this is a little embarrassing, but when I first came to the BSC, I was fascinated by the idea that my QA scores could be tracked and I could see actual statistics about how I was doing, because I was coming from a place here on campus that had no visibility like that. And so I was consistently asking my lead at the time for updates on my QA scores, and I was always like, oh, you're doing great, you're doing fantastic. And so I thought that was the case, but maybe didn't fully have the trust because I was never getting feedback on what I could improve. And embarrassingly enough, when I got promoted to be a supervisor and got access to my QAs, I found out that I had horrible QA scores, like I'd been receiving very bad QA scores, and I had no idea. So that definitely lost trust for me in my lead. And that's just an example to you guys of, you don't want to be put in that situation where somebody finds out that you're not helping them as much as you could have been, because definitely builds more trust to be there to help them improve than it does to leave them in the dark. All right, so this is in your homework, or was supposed to be in your binder last night, but you guys can find it in there now. So I know you didn't get the chance to fill this out, and we're a little over time, so I'm not going to give you a ton of time to fill this out today, but your homework tonight is not as long as it was last night. So I'm going to ask you guys to take the time tonight, fill this out in your homework binder, and just go in and rate yourselves on a scale of 1 to 5 in each of the areas on this assessment, and say, okay, how confident do I feel in this area of building trust with my team? How capable do I feel? And if you mark yourself low, make sure that you're adding notes in there about why you marked yourself low, or what you could do to improve in that area as you go into becoming a supervisor, keeping in mind all of those areas that you might struggle with a little bit. Everyone find that? Sorry, I know it's a few pages back. Yes. So we can follow up on that tomorrow, but if you guys will take the time to do that in your homework tonight, that would be great. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but part of trust is having a relationship with your employees. What relationships, and I want us to just brainstorm anything, what relationships are you guys going to have in your position as a supervisor? Let's just name some.
Well, there's a natural supervisor-employee relationship, like a professional one.
Right. I'm going to actually write these up real quick. Go ahead, Guillermo.
And as well, I would say that kind of get confident too. Hopefully they don't come up to you with sins and because you're not the bishop, but definitely if you feel overwhelmed with stuff, they can come up to you and tell, hey, like you during the 1-1, this is what I'm struggling with. Like that.
Right. And I probably don't need to draw this on everyone, but you guys should just know relationships go both ways, right? So it's the same with your employee to you. You're building that they're building that relationship with you as well. Okay. Other relationships you might have in your position.
I think one of them can be a teacher. Like if you teach them something. It's like,
Yes,
yeah.
definitely as a teacher. I'm going to put one up here to just hopefully give us some direction where we want to go. So as a supervisor, you'll probably have a relationship from you to your lead, right? Or your manager. There's going to be the responsibility for your manager to build that relationship with you, as well as you to build it with them, right? Something else that I would think about is your relationship from supervisor to supervisor. Many of us are working on teams. Actually, I think all of us are working on teams in which there's other supervisors working with other teams, right? So in the phones team, that would be other team leads that would be working at the same time as your shift. In training, that's going to be Alicia, and you're going to have to figure out that relationship with her and with me, right? So any other relationships you guys feel aren't listed up here?
So when we talk about relationships, are we talking like positions or are we talking about?
Yeah, so I'm just talking about types of relationships that you're gonna have here,
Okay,
if that makes sense. So the other one I can think of, unless you guys can think of one, is supervisor to another colleague, right? So this may be somebody that works in your department that's not on your team. This may be you going and interacting with somebody in CX when you have a question, or interacting with other people at leadership retreat, but there's still some relationships, maybe not as frequently used, that you're going to be experiencing from supervisor to colleague. So as we think about that, I just want you guys to consider what kind of relationship skills you're going to need in each of these areas, in each of these places, because relationships happen not only from you to your employee, but to everyone else who is a part of this team. And you guys will notice the benefits of having good relationships with everybody. What would be the consequences if you did not have a good relationship in one of these areas? We don't have to talk about all of them, but we can just list some.
I think it just brings negativity to your team. So like if one of my employees have an issue with me, it just brings everyone else down. Like everyone can see the drama and what's going on, and it's not good.
Yeah, I totally agree. That can definitely affect and bring a certain type of attitude or atmosphere to your team. How would it?
So one thought that I had was in the supervisor to supervisor, right? As you interact with other supervisors, if you don't have a good relationship with them, by virtue of being a supervisor yourself, sometimes people may confide in you who don't necessarily report to you. And if you don't have a good relationship with the supervisor to whom they do report, that could create some drama or some challenges there as well, because they're confiding in you for a reason. And yet you also need to have a good relationship with their immediate supervisor so that you can work through whatever the challenges there may be. So
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a good example of you need to have a great relationship with your counterparts, with your peers, as well as subordinates. And in the event that because of the role you now occupy, someone confides in you or comes to you that you don't have direct influence over, you need to still establish a rapport with other supervisors to be able to work through those dynamics.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective and that point specifically. This is something I think we experience oftentimes on the phones team because there's so many supervisors that work at the same time as each other. Or maybe there's other employees that have had previous supervisors that they go to confide in, but you definitely want to make sure that you have a good enough trust and relationship with that person to address anything that may come up to you. And it does happen that way on our teams. I've definitely seen it in mine, and I'm sure in other teams where somebody comes to confide in you and suddenly you're given this information that you have to do something about, right? So you need to make sure that you have that good relationship to be able to address it with people.
I have another thing. I know like in training, like it's important for us to have good relationship with the leads, because like if we make changes or if there are things that we need to start implementing, like on training's end, like if we don't have a good relationship with you guys and if we aren't communicating like our expectations, then that's going to suffer like for the agents and that isn't going to be implemented. And so.
Yeah, lack of good relationships can definitely affect the work or the processes that we're trying to implement. It can cause roadblocks or barriers in there if we don't have those good relationships and good communication. I like that perspective. Any other thoughts before we move on from this? Okay, that's totally fine. I just want you guys to consider beyond your relationships with your employees, what other relationships you're going to have and going to need to build in your new positions. Strong relationships are important to leadership, and we've already talked about some of the consequences of this, but without a good relationship, often we run into those roadblocks and those barriers that keep us from being able to reach our full potential or attain things that we want to attain. So it's important that we're taking the time to build those relationships and build that credibility and trust with everyone that we're working with. our employees, as well as the people that we interact with from day to day. Maybe whether it be in our team or whether it be in another team within our department that we often talk to. We're going to talk a little bit about some points from this book specifically. I've read some summaries and I really want to read the book. I haven't had the time to completely read it, but they offer some really good advice on what you can do to build relationships with other people. And this is not just as a supervisor, but in any situation. What are some good skills that can help you build those relationships? This is the title of the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's by Dale Carnegie. So that's where I'm drawing this information from, but this book's actually over 80 years old and is still being used heavily in business today. So if you're looking for a read, I've added this to my list and recommend it to anyone from what I've read so far. But one of the first things he talks about is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. People don't respond well initially if right off the bat you're just coming off as criticizing. I think there's a difference, as we've talked about today, between offering helpful, constructive criticism that comes from a place of caring and criticism that just feels like you're attacking a person, right? So I would consider that with this. Dale Carnegie, he just says, we cannot change behavior with threats or punishment. It has to come from a place of trust, relationship, and caring, right? Number 2, make people feel important with curiosity. I really appreciated this point in particular because I think in some ways when we're trying to build relationships, it can be easy to get caught up in what we're trying to help them understand about us. But instead, it's good to go in with the attitude of curiosity about the other person. So knowing that you're wanting to be curious about them from your first interactions and being genuine about it and thinking about what do I really want to know about this person. Ask questions that allow you to be sincerely interested. So when you're thinking about getting to know a person, something that will help you be genuine is thinking about questions that will be interesting to you, but also interesting to them to ask about. And then make sure as you're learning about them that you are taking the time to appreciate them in a conversation and encourage them to keep sharing with you. That'll be helpful as well. Number 3, appeal to the other person's desires. So make sure that you're empathizing with them and putting yourself in their shoes. And empathizing, we'll have this in a homework assignment tonight, is different than sympathizing, right? It's putting yourself on their level and understanding, okay, that's where you're coming from and you are placing yourself in their shoes or in the path that they're walking. Help them to see how it will benefit them. So instead of portraying things in a way where you're like, this is benefiting me and the organization by you doing this, help them understand what role it plays in their life. And then this quote from Henry Ford I thought was great. If there is any one secret to success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from his angle as well as your own. So just keep that in mind. And then this is I'm going to hide this because these are in different sections. So this is part 2, and this is 6 ways to make people like you. And this is become genuinely interested in other people. So we talked about this already, but people can tell when you just want to talk about yourself. And the people you really like talking to are the people that are interested in you as a person. That's just human nature. We like talking to the people that seem to care about what we have to say. So instead of going into situations looking to impress other people, go into a situation looking for other people to impress you and have that mindset about it already and think, what is it about this person that I could be impressed about? Ask them about themselves instead of always talking about yourself. And remember the important things like Kim brought up in her example of her lead, that not only remembered what she brought up in her one-on-one, but addressed it later on in the week and talked to her outside of that set aside meeting time. Number 2, genuinely smile. This one was one that I found some disagreements on, but I thought there were some really good suggestions. Make sure that when you smile, it's just always becoming of a person to smile, but don't be disingenuous about it. Smile when you're happy, and that's always a good thing to practice. But when you're not happy, and if you don't feel like smiling, give a warm greeting to people, still ask how they're doing, and then actually listen for their response and expect more than a, I'm good. And then avoiding negativity. That all of these things will give you the same positive reaction as being a person that smiles a lot. Number 3, remember people's names. People like to hear their name. We know that that's one of our customer service things that we emphasize with all of our groups is the ability to use a name in our customer service interactions. But the same principle applies for your employees. It's important to learn their name right off the bat, be intentional about remembering it, and then use it often. It helps people feel that you're focusing on them. Number 4, be a good listener by encouraging others to talk about themselves. So we've talked about this a little, but some things that come up with this situation is when you're encouraging others to talk about themselves, you also want to ask interesting questions that are going to keep them engaged in the conversation, right? So make sure that your questions are interesting, but as well actively listen to what they have to say so they can tell you're listening, whether that's restating what you understood they said, or asking a question that's based off of something they said that leads to deeper conversation. And then, of course, give verbal and nonverbal encouragement with that. Number 5, talk in terms of the other person's interests. So look for topics that you know when you bring that up, they just light up and they could talk all day about Lord of the Rings or whatever it is. So learn their interests and then bring those up with them. And then just this quote that I love from Teddy Roosevelt, the royal road to a person's heart is to talk about the things he or she treasures most. I believe that's true. Definitely helps build relationships when they know you know what they care about and when they have proof of that because of what you guys have talked about. I'm really running low on time, so we're going to skip this practice and move on to one-on-ones. We'll just take a quick minute on this one, but does anyone have a good or a bad one-on-one story that they could share with us? Nobody? Kim?
I feel like it's like a good one-on-one story, but I just remember one time it was like my second week on the phones having a really hard call, and this guy was like yelling at me and stuff. Anyways, my lead like took me on a one-on-one because she could tell I was struggling, and I remember just like crying to her or whatever, and she genuinely took the time to just like listen, and then she was able to give feedback, and she was able to say like, hey, like she was able to put or help me see like a different perspective on how, hey, he's not being like personal with you, he's frustrated about the situation. And so that helped me kind of change my perspective with future callers, that maybe if I had an angry caller in the future, it's not specifically towards me, it's towards the situation. Maybe they're frustrated about these deadlines and so forth. And then that was able to help me grow to help those callers better. And for me, that's like a good one-on-one, and I think about that a lot when I do take calls. I'm able to just remember what I learned out of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I like about that. First of all, that it came in a moment when you needed it. I'd like to just emphasize one-on-ones should happen often and they should be scheduled, but it's also not bad to use this as a tool to help your employees when you can tell like this is a moment in which they need it. And that's probably something that really helped build your relationship with them, is that you could tell your supervisor cared about you enough to take you aside when they knew you needed it. The second thing I really appreciated about that was that your supervisor took the opportunity not only to listen, but to then slow things down and have a teaching moment with you, right? That affected you from there on after. So I appreciate that. It's a good example. I wish we had more time to talk about more, but just consider maybe some things about your one-on-ones that you guys have had that have been successful or not successful, and what was it about them that made it good or bad? Why are one-on-ones important? This is just some general things that I've read from different sources that people say one-on-ones are good for. So this is actually from the CEO of Intel. He says 90 minutes of your time can enhance the quality of your subordinates for up to 2 weeks or 80 hours of work. And that's why we do it, is because actually taking the time to talk with your employees and talk about their goals, talk about their interests and what they're achieving affects their work. And that's why we value it and take the time out of everybody's shifts to do them. One-on-ones are not for the supervisor, and that's a myth that I would like to address, because I actually believed this for a long time until I started doing some research about one-on-ones, as it was a time for me to talk to my employee about things I was concerned about with them or what I would like to see from them. But actually, this is a shared meeting. This is a time in which your employee shares just as much stake or investment in this meeting as you do, and you should feel that way moving forward. It's just as important for them to be able to talk to you as it is for you to be able to talk to them. It's a designated time for you guys to build that trust and build those relationships and then follow up on it later on. It's as well an opportunity for you to fix and address problems when they're small. It gives you a designated time for your employees to bring up concerns, thoughts, feelings that they have before the issue has escalated into something that's going to be much harder to address. It's a time to motivate, to establish vision, as you guys learned about last night, as well as set goals and help them develop and learn professionally. And then it's also a time for you to receive feedback from them about their employment here and their experiences, but also to give them some feedback and come prepared with that. So these are just some general keys, and these are actually in your binders to what you should have for a successful one-on-one, and that's consistency. If we wait longer than 2 weeks, the one-on-one loses its effectiveness, and it just becomes another meeting that your employees have to go to, right? But if we're doing them consistently, your employees are seeing the benefit of it and having that frequency of time to be able to address things with you. Make sure that when you're scheduling it, this is just something I've learned in my experience, I would recommend you use Outlook or some other tool that allows both you and the employee to see it in the same place. So you're both accountable to one another to keep that meeting time. I've seen a lot of one-on-ones get pushed back when there isn't that accountability there, so I just recommend you do that. Number 2, and we already talked about this, but remember the employee's responsibility in the one-on-one meeting. It's not just a meeting for you, they're also responsible to come prepared. And this is a little bit of a different approach than what you guys may have had, but this is what I'd like to teach you, is that they should feel like they have a responsibility in this meeting too, and a presence. So I would just describe to your employees that you would like them to come prepared with their own statistics, with their own information, with their own maybe feedback or opinions that they would like to share with you. And it's time for you guys to collaborate and address things that your employee is concerned about. And with that, you guys need to have a shared agenda. So a place for your employee to put things that they want to talk about, as well as for you to put things that you want to talk about. This gives the opportunity for you and the employee to prepare for the meeting. Number 2 is your responsibility. It's not just your employees meeting, it's a time for you to come prepared to talk to them. And they could bring up anything with us giving them an agenda. There could be a lot that they have to talk about. So make sure that you're coming prepared with your own questions, coming prepared to listen, coming prepared to take notes and follow up on things that they've asked you to do. And having already read your agenda so you know what they want to talk about. And then 4th thing is, like we said, having a shared agenda. Teams is a good place that you guys can do this, but there's other platforms you could look into using. However, Teams is already one of our tools that we use. So that's why I'm recommending it to you. You can, this is what you should always do with your agenda, is make sure you prepare ahead of time the items and expect your employee to do the same, and review it before the meeting. Have it open so that you guys are following and using the agenda, as well as listing your action and follow-up items. And this is something I learned is really helpful in a one-on-one and helps maintain that trust and credibility, is when you're promising to do something in that situation, whether it be you or your employee, you have a place that you know you've written it down and you're gonna hold to that promise and follow up on it. Sorry, I know we're going really fast. I went really over time in the beginning, so bear with me, you guys. But here's just some rules. They should be happening preferably once a week is good if you guys can make that happen on your team. If you're on a team of 3, that might be more doable than if you're on a team of 6 or more. But like I said, for them to be effective, they should happen bi-weekly. So make sure that you're scheduling them so that you can make those meetings happen every other week. And this is the recommended duration from my research that I found is 45 minutes to an hour. And the reason behind that is oftentimes you don't get warmed up to the topics that you're really getting in the weeds in and starting to develop solutions and ideas until after that 20 or 30-minute mark. It takes the first part of the conversation to warm it up and actually get into the deeper conversations. Some of your employees may not want to talk for 45 minutes to an hour, and that's something you're going to have to read. But as long as you feel like they're still being effective with their one-on-one time, you can base that time off of your employees and what they feel comfortable with. Some general rules: make sure you're in a public place for your one-on-ones. And a good rule I like to ask myself when I feel like a one-on-one is going long is what we are talking about still productive for the employee-lead relationship? If you can answer yes to that question, then you shouldn't be stopping anyone in the middle of a deep conversation to say, oh, it's been an hour, I don't have time now. You know what I mean? If you're really getting into those good conversations and it's still building your relationship, then you should have time to be able to finish that one-on-one. Like we've already said, schedule the meeting outlook, have a shared agenda, and then always, always, always fill out your one-on-one ticket. And this is on your team lead dashboard. You guys will be learning about this in your homework tonight. But the reason you have that one-on-one ticket is because it helps us to track that you've had the one-on-ones, but also helps future supervisors and future semesters go back and kind of see what people's experiences are like. And you guys will probably utilize this as you get your new team, but you can go back and read past one-on-one tickets to see where your employees are coming from and what experiences they've already had here. Okay, we talked about setting. I'm gonna really quickly just cover that it's always needs to be in a public place. That's just a good general rule for a one-on-one. In an office with a window, on campus somewhere, wherever it is that you guys feel is appropriate for the conversation. But also another rule is no one-on-ones off campus. Might be fun to go for a walk and change the scenery sometimes, but also you're putting the school at liability if you leave campus. So no one-on-ones off campus. It's just a good general rule. There's some preparation work that goes into a one-on-one, and I've kind of paired this out into what the agent's responsibility is and what your responsibility is, but the agent should be responsible to review their past projects and their statistics for their work. So have that expectation for them to come in prepared to talk about it, and don't just give the expectation that you're going to be the one that brings that up, but have the expectation that they're going to be the ones that address where their progress is with that. And they should review their goals and what their goal progress is and be prepared to talk about that. They should have feedback and questions that they've added to your agenda, as well as followed up on their action items from your past agenda. Things that you guys will want to review before your one-on-one, like I said, past one-on-one tickets can be really helpful. Taking the time to talk outside your one-on-ones, like Kim said, and make sure you're not just saving those relationship building moments for your one-on-one, but doing it all the time throughout the week before you meet with them again. Looking at their statistics, their progress, their projects and goals. Those are all important for you to know and inside and out before going into that one-on-one so that you're prepared to talk about it. And then we've already talked about a lot of these with the agenda and the meeting. But just make sure that you're following up on things that you've committed to and looking at questions and topics for your future one-on-one that have been added to the agenda. All right, format. This is good. We'll just address this really quickly. Sorry again, guys, poor planning on my part for time, but always start with your prep work when you're going into a one-on-one. And then I think a really good thing to start off with to warm up that conversation is to take the time to build your employee and lead relationship and actively listen to things that they're interested about and find out about things that aren't just related to work, right? But to have that set aside time to warm up the conversation, help to build your relationships. And then you want to make sure that you follow up on action items from the previous semester or from the previous meeting and start going into your agenda and getting into the weeds with the topics you guys decided you wanted to discuss. Something you should always cover at some point in your one-on-one is statistics or projects. You want to make sure that you're addressing their work and how they're doing. That's the only way to help people progress, is by continually talking to them about how they're progressing. And this is a time, like I said, for you to also plan on receiving feedback for you or your organization, but also you'll probably oftentimes have feedback to deliver to your agent. It's time for you guys to ask questions and get to a deeper understanding of the topics you guys are talking about. And then make sure that you're setting up you're setting goals and following up on those goals. And we'll talk about goals specifically tomorrow, but this is a designated time for you guys to set and follow up on goals with employees. All right. And then this is just all the post work and what you guys do at the end. This is something you don't have to do, but that I've found really beneficial in my one-on-ones, is to end with some employee recognition. We as supervisors don't always get the time throughout our week to recognize employees in the moment for good things that they're doing, but I found it really helps to take the time at the end of every one-on-one to reflect on something you've appreciated about that employee from that week, and to bring it to their attention and say, hey, I really appreciated, Sebastian, that you took the time to shadow that chat agent this week. And it meant a lot to me because they're new to our team and I know that they learned a lot from you, whatever it is. But setting aside time at the end to make a point to compliment them, as well as afterwards, you want to update your agenda so it's ready for your next meeting for new topics of discussion. Fill out the one-on-one ticket. You have to do that every time, so just plan on it. And then go ahead and move forward with addressing any action items from your meeting before the next time you meet. Okay, I know that was a lot, and I'm really, really sad we're not going to have time for role plays, but I'll try to make time for it tomorrow. You guys are going to have some examples in the homework tonight of some one-on-ones that either went good or bad, and they're real experiences from the BSC. So since we didn't get a lot of time in class today, just take the time tonight to really reflect on what you would have done had you been the lead in that situation, and what you could have changed if it didn't go well, or what you could have learned from that situation. And then, like I said, tomorrow, I promise I will try to make time for some role plays in this, because it's good to have practice. But thanks for being here today.
Once more about like one-on-ones that I haven't thought about. It's good to go over that. Thank you very much, Jessica.
Yeah, if it makes you feel better. I felt the same way as I was learning and researching for this. I was like, wow, there's a lot I haven't considered about how to do effective one-on-ones. So yes, thank you.